You see it in almost every industry. Highly competent professionals painstakingly building their skills, only to stall out in middle management, while vastly less capable individuals aggressively capture the best clients, the highest salaries, and the top roles. The natural reaction is to view this as a temporary flaw in the market. Conventional wisdom suggests that aggressively demanding more is risky, and that making polite concessions is the safer strategy to build long-term trust and reliable relationships. But looking at the data, prioritizing politeness in a professional transaction rarely builds relational equity. Instead, it functions as a psychological trap, a way to protect your own ego under the guise of being a good collaborator. This diagram illustrates data from a behavioral negotiation study. When researchers instructed one group to negotiate aggressively and push for maximum value, that group captured a 37% premium over their more flexible peers. Prioritizing social harmony over your objective market value does not make you a better partner. It actively destroys your earning potential. If aggressively asking for what you're worth works so well, why do so many highly skilled professionals consistently underprice themselves? The common assumption is that it stems from high empathy, or a classic case of imposter syndrome. That hesitation functions as a subconscious defense mechanism designed to protect the ego from the risk of a definitive rejection. Holding on to the identity of the accommodating, easy-to-work-with professional provides a comforting narrative. It creates a safe harbor where you never have to test your actual value. By hiding behind the facade of a polite, low-maintenance professional, you avoid facing the objective reality of your market worth. To understand exactly what drives this defense mechanism, we have to look past economics and examine the internal emotional barriers at play, starting with the work of psychologist Brené Brown. Brown defines shame in a very specific way. She argues that shame is not the fear of external judgment, but rather the profound fear that people will discover you are inherently lacking in value. This directly informs the act of quoting a price or asking for a raise. Avoiding the ask protects you from the terrifying possibility that the market might agree you aren't as valuable as you hope. Consider an independent designer who possesses top-tier technical skills. The moment a prospective client shows slight hesitation at the initial quote, the designer preemptively cuts their own fee in half, sacrificing their margin immediately. Compare that to a competitor with lesser skills who holds firm on their price. When challenged, they confidently point to their portfolio as proof of value, refusing to negotiate against themselves. A refusal to test the market is simply a refusal to face your actual limitations. You choose to keep your ego completely intact, but you pay for that comfort directly out of your own revenue. It is tempting to view underpricing as an investment. We treat our career like a social savings account, assuming that the concessions we make today will earn us gratitude and favors in the future. That assumption ignores a core economic concept called information asymmetry. Information asymmetry occurs when one party in a transaction possesses less knowledge about a product or service than the other. This diagram illustrates how information asymmetry plays out. When a buyer lacks complete information about the quality of your work, your price becomes their primary proxy for quality. This leads to a behavioral economics phenomenon known as generous punishment. When you make an excessive concession, the buyer doesn't feel grateful. Instead, they suspect underlying flaws, triggering an immediate psychological devaluation of what you are offering. We can see this in action on these charts tracking the A/B negotiation experiment we mentioned earlier. The researchers gave two groups different instructions. Group A was told to be highly flexible, while Group B was instructed to be overtly greedy and push for more. Group B secured the higher yield. But here is the critical data point. Look at the relational goodwill meters. Group B suffered 0 relational damage during the process. You see this play out in sales every day. The representative who enters a room apologizing for taking up time converts at a fraction of the rate of the representative who walks in, sets a firm 3-minute time limit, and confidently pitches a solution. The professional marketplace rewards confidently signaled value over polite intentions, operating as a system of trade rather than a ledger of social favors. Even if you understand the economics, there is still one final psychological barrier to clear: the paralyzing fear that making an aggressive ask will cause permanent social fallout if you are rejected. To dismantle that fear, we have to look at sociologist Irving Goffman's theory of dramaturgical analysis. Dramaturgical analysis is the sociological perspective that human interaction is essentially a theatrical performance where individuals actively manage the impressions others have of them. This image represents a cognitive distortion closely tied to Goffman's work, known as the spotlight effect. When you stand under that spotlight, your internal script tells you that your counterpart is scrutinizing every word. You assume a single aggressive request will permanently define their entire perception of your character. But the reality of the social theater is very different. The audience isn't analyzing your performance. They are entirely consumed by their own anxieties, their own individual performances, and their own operational metrics. In practice, a counterpart's irritation over an aggressive ask rarely lasts beyond the 5 minutes it takes them to pivot back to their own priorities and KPIs. The permanent social penalty you are so afraid of is a phantom. Nobody internalizes your rejection, and nobody is thinking about you after the meeting ends, except you. Internal shame is clearly a deeply flawed compass for navigating market behavior, but knowing that doesn't fix the problem. You need a practical framework to override those ingrained instincts. This matrix is the desensitization protocol. It is a 3-step framework designed to transition you away from relying on your intrinsic identity and move you toward extrinsic roleplay. Step 1 explicitly quantifies the downside. You rationally map the return on investment of your own embarrassment. You force your brain to weigh 5 minutes of awkwardness against tens of thousands of dollars in lost revenue. Step 2 requires establishing a rejection KPI. By deliberately accumulating 3 safe, non-harmful rejections per week, like quoting a price that makes you slightly nervous, you progressively reset your brain's baseline fear response to the word no. Step 3 relies on cognitive decoupling. If advocating for your own worth triggers a paralyzing ego defense, the most effective solution is to bypass your ego entirely by playing a character. Stop negotiating as yourself. Negotiate as a fiduciary. Act strictly on behalf of your family, your team, or the principle of objective market fairness. If your best friend possessed your exact skills, you wouldn't hesitate to demand top dollar for their time. Visibility carries a statistically inevitable byproduct. A small fraction of the market will simply dislike you for taking up space. The ultimate professional goal is to stop managing other people's assumed feelings. You have to step out of the background, make the aggressive ask, and force the market to accurately assess your true worth.